Yeah. What's that?
The speaker no is spoiled.
The speaker he's saying is spoiled.
It's spoiled. Okay.
Okay, then we won't use the speaker. Meaning it's not, it's giving.
We can hear.
Surabhi, what's the speaker like? Can you try?
Check.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Like
Static.
Is it
Wireless
is
technology.
it interfering?
Static.
We could try again.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let me first introduce Geshe Tenzin Legtsok was born Brian A. Beffa in the USA.
That's right.
That's quite a name. And he's a Buddhist monk in the 19th year of his Geshe studies, and he's now completed the Geshe studies, or still some more to go?
There's a little more to go.
Little more to go. He has, never ending. He has the title of Geshe, and he's studying at Sarah J. Monastic University, which is the same college as Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche and many other illustrious beings. He studies classic Indian Buddhist treatises and their Tibetan commentaries in the tradition of the ancient Nalanda University. He was ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2001. Born in Virginia in the USA in 1973, he obtained his Bachelor of Arts from Kenyon College in 1995. The question, what makes for the most happy and meaningful life, compelled him to major in philosophy during college. It gradually led to his study of meditation and philosophy with teachers from the exiled Tibetan community. What did you actually start your studies with?
Where?
What was your major when you started your studies?
In college?
Yeah.
Philosophy.
It was philosophy. Okay, it was philosophy.
Yeah.
And so then he, in India and Nepal, he took teachers from 1999 up to the present. For the past 15 years, he's tried to make basic Buddhist teachings accessible to various audiences in India, including Guwahati and other places, Delhi,
Bangalore
mainly,
Bangalore.
where there's at PMT Center, and also through essays, lectures, and meditation instruction, also in the US. And I guess what I just want to add to that is that, as with some other Western students, monks from the USA especially, I think it's quite an example for us in India that there's people willing to learn Tibetan language and study for 19 years, which means 6 days a week, 7 days a week, pretty much.
Yeah, 6 days a week you study, and then on the seventh day you do your washing and cleaning and shopping and everything else. The holiday is the busiest day of the week.
Okay, so it's really it's very inspiring, right? And then to carry on for so long, study, and then taking the exam and becoming qualified, really well qualified, very, very well qualified to teach. This is something amazing, and I know it makes our teacher, Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, very happy. And so anyway, I won't say any more now, except that one praise that in India also we do have more Geshes, and also Geshe Mas. There are also lady Geshes now started. There's some very good Geshe Mas, I think, now.
Yeah, very good.
And yeah, let's hope we can dedicate today that this creates the cause for people in India also from the heartland, Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, and so forth. There are some monks and Geshes from Maharashtra and maybe Karnataka and a few other places. Of course, Ladakh, but the Hindi heartland and so forth and other states don't have enough Geshes yet, or highly qualified teachers. So we can pray for that. So thank you so much, Geshe-la, for accepting our invitation to teach. And as you can see, there's a reasonable online presence and 8-9 people here at Tushita. So please instruct us on how to approach the Dharma. And apologies from our director, who couldn't be here today, Dr. Anuka Singh. is otherwise engaged, otherwise she would be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kabirji, for the very generous introduction. I must say, when I was a new, well, before I was a monk even, when I was newly a new Buddhist, you could say. I took refuge in 1999. That time, Kabirji was already an old student. So when I first came to Tushita Dharamsala, you were one of them. You're one of the main teachers, I think, old in experience.
None of that.
And in your vows, refuge vows, Bodhisattva vows, Tantra vows, I'm sure you had them all in. So yeah, can you hear online? You can hear okay, right? Okay, good. So and you way in the back, if you can't hear, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, that's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so thank you for inviting me. This is about, I don't know, I think it's my third time or so giving a talk at here at Tushita, Delhi.
Tsongkhapa talk.
Yeah, that's the last one. No, I was thinking that's the last time I was here. I went through the biography of Lama Tsongkhapa. That was before the pandemic. No, so this is the first time. There's many firsts after the pandemic now. I was thinking, it's like we've all crossed a great river of tragedy together, and we're on the other side now. So yeah, so I'm happy to be back. Welcome to you all here. So we're having 3 sessions today, and then 2 sessions the day after tomorrow, Sunday, on attachment and anger. So today's topic, Kabirji requested this approaching the Dharma. And do you remember the subtitle? I just was looking at the first email you sent me. I forgot it also. Then I was looking to check, what am I supposed to talk about?
Yeah.
Then the very eloquent email, very eloquent subtitle. Huh?
What was it?
Oh, really?
Yes,
That's,
yes.
oh, I didn't see that. The
Oh,
one,
yeah.
the subtitle I have is approaching the Dharma. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. The speaker just worked.
Yeah, it's,
approaching the Dharma. No, I don't remember it now. How to, something about a spiritual practice. How to have a spiritual practice. No, there's something more.
No, it's actually the main point to Geshe was there's so much jargon nowadays and so much WhatsApp talk and cliches and new age stuff has been there a long time.
Yeah.
What's authentic Dharma and what is garbage? I mean, you know,
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
garbage.
Okay.
What is
So
watered down?
discerning authentic Dharma from garbage. So we'll talk about. No, anyway, I have, yeah. So I thought about those ideas, those topics, and came up with a little outline. So yeah. Well, maybe I'll start with the story. Should we start with prayers? Let's do some prayers.
Yeah, some prayers tonight.
What?
Even though people may not.
It's
know
too
that.
loud now. Okay, I'll just turn it off. Just forget it.
No, I'll just turn it down.
Do I just turn it down? Okay.
Oh, relax.
It's got a very tinny sound also. It's a very tinny, strange sound.
You need a new system.
You can hear me, yeah. I can speak. No, I can speak loudly. No problem.
Without taken.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes without the PA system, it's much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you usually do prayers first at the beginning?
We do
Some prayers?
motivation, but a prayer or 2 in Tibetan would be wonderful. And if you could give the translation, that would be great.
Okay. Well, why don't we just generate a short motivation and then recite Shakyamuni Buddha's name mantra a few times as a way of going for refuge. So, I mean, since, yeah, I do like to, especially at a Dharma center, it's a proper Dharma teaching. I think I mean, the whole point of spending some time doing a motivation and some prayers at the beginning is, well, the motivation is to make sure what we're doing becomes Dharma, right? So that's what we're going to talk about more today. But it mainly depends on whether an action, you know, whether it's an action of our body, our speech, or our mind, whether it becomes Dharma or not, mainly depends upon the motivation, right? So there's 2 kinds of motivation: the causal motivation, and then the motivation at the actual time of the action, which comes just immediately before or accompanies the action. So ideally we make, you know, the causal motivation comes sometime before, either, you know, years, months, days, hours, or minutes before the action. And then the motivation at the time of the action is at the actual moment just before or accompanying the action. So, so hopefully already from the time you set out to, leave from your work or your house to come here today, you already, had a virtuous motivation in your mind. But even if you didn't, then now we can just reflect on our motivation briefly and adjust it and make sure it's something positive. Right? So why don't you sit in your meditation posture and take a few deep breaths, relax, check the points of your posture. Bob will have to sit up in the back a little bit. Bob,
Yes,
you should sit up straight.
okay.
We'll meditate a little bit, generate a motivation.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You listen.
Yeah. You said he had very good ears, but he didn't hear me the first time when I said, sit in your meditation posture. He was reading something. Okay. Yeah, so sit straight and check that your torso is erect, balanced, shoulders are broad, chest is open, you can breathe freely. Rest your hands comfortably in your lap. Slightly tuck your chin, let your eyes, close them, or let your gaze fall towards the ground. And then gradually turn your attention inwards. And check the state of your mind. So there's many different ways to generate a positive motivation. But while it helps to kind of feel confident in what the way we're generating a motivation is correct by kind of knowing what we're aiming for. So generally, if you know the three scopes of the Lam Rim and the motivations for the three scopes, the first being, we want our motivation to extend beyond just this life. Of course, we want well-being and happiness in this life. But if we aim for just that, that's worldly kind of state of mind. So that's not Dharma. So we want to also generate a motivation whereby we aspire to achieve a state of well-being and happiness, at least for ourselves, that transcends this life. So recognizing that death is certain to happen. The time death will befall each of us is uncertain, could happen anytime. And then those things which will be beneficial to us as we pass through that transition from this life to a next life are positive states of mind. And also positive karma, stores of merit, and any virtuous aspirations that we have. So we can at least try to generate a motivation that what we do here together in this session this evening, that it becomes a cause for our well-being and happiness, not only in this life, but also in future lives. And then right from the beginning, another way, so we want and then beyond, well, we'll go beyond that in a minute. But another way to make our motivation virtuous is that it's not only for ourselves alone, but we also generate a sense of concern for the well-being of others. Others we care about, obviously, our partner, our children, our parents, friends and family, but also other sentient beings who are the same as us in wishing to have happiness and wishing to be free from suffering. So we think about the other human beings, the strangers, and even those whom we tend to dislike and try to avoid, simply because they're also sentient beings like us. It's good for us, good for them if we aspire for their well-being. And not only human beings, also all beings of the other realms, animal realms, hell beings, hungry ghosts, gods, demigods. So it's good to imagine them all seated around oneself. feel that how you're interconnected with them from life to life. And just as we aspire to that, whatever we do here tonight together becomes a cause of well-being for ourselves, then similarly we can aspire that it all becomes a cause of well-being for this countless other kind mother sentient beings, right, who've been kind to us in this life and from life to life. But even if what we do here tonight does become a powerful cause for the happiness of ourselves and all other sentient beings in future lives, still, as long as we take rebirth in the future life, even we all take a good rebirth, eventually we'll, because we're still under the control of karma, contaminated karma and afflictive emotions, then no matter how good of a rebirth we take in future lives, most likely, unless we achieve liberation or enlightenment in that life, then we'll age from the moment of conception. We'll begin aging, and then eventually we'll, meet with many hardships and problems, including physical and mental illness. And then gradually, if we're fortunate, we live a long life, but then, the body, the faculties decline, and then we'll die from that life. Experience the suffering of being separated from our body, from our friends and family, from all of our the things that are familiar to us, and then again take rebirth, and then again die, again take rebirth without end. So seeing that's the case for ourselves and all other sentient beings, then we can generate the higher aspiration to not only that by engaging this session, not only we create cause for happiness in future lives, but we create a cause to achieve the state of well-being and peace and security that's free from this process of being under the control of afflictive emotions and karma, so that we achieve nirvana. But even if we achieve nirvana for ourselves, or can we lead others to achieve nirvana, then what then? Then we just abide in a state of peace, of endless kind of peace without any suffering. But still, we wouldn't have fully developed our own potential to know phenomena infinitely, and also to continuously engage in activity benefiting sentient beings. Right? We wouldn't have achieved a state of full enlightenment, sure. And we wouldn't have eliminated kind of the subtle taint of a selfish concern. So seeing that state of abiding in a kind of infinite peace, whereby we don't do something to benefit others, would be unacceptable in terms of repaying the kindness of others, and also unacceptable in terms of not fully developing our own potential. So thereby, we can generate the aspiration both to fulfill the aims of others and to fulfill the aims of ourselves, to achieve that by engaging in this session tonight together, that it all this becomes a cause to achieve full enlightenment, the state of a fully enlightened Buddha, in order to perfectly work for the welfare of all sentient beings. So whatever level of motivation seems makes sense and is authentic for you, then try to generate that. And then, as a way of requesting the blessing of Shakyamuni Buddha and going for refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, so we can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha and the field of refuge in the space in front of us. And so in the space in front of oneself, at the height of your eyebrows, about 2 arms length distant, 1 or 2 arms length distant. then visualize Shakyamuni Buddha or any other object of refuge you usually visualize. And if you want to do more elaborately, you can also visualize Dharma text representing the Dharma jewel, and Shakyamuni Buddha surrounded by other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and enlightened beings or holy beings, such as Manjushri, Maitreya, Nagarjuna, Asanga, Shantideva, and all the lineage lamas, Atisha, Tsongkhapa, down to one's own gurus of this style. As well as the Dalai Lama, Lamas of Rinpoche Lamas. So no matter what kind of visual appearance you can generate, the main thing is to feel that they're present in the face and the space in front of you. And to recognize you're being in need of help to be free from, the danger of falling into the low realms in future lives and dealing with obstacles in this life, and being in need of guidance and how to be free from samsara, achieve full enlightenment. So recognizing a need from one's own side, and then recognizing the ability of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, who are all one essence with one's own guru, to protect one from suffering and to lead one to the state of peerless enlightenment. So then from your heart, turn for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And we can recite the Buddha's name mantra a few times as a way of going for refuge. So we'll stop there just 3 times. So briefly visualize from the objects of refuge, then white light rays radiate out, infinite light rays radiate out throughout the universe. On the tip of each light ray is an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha. So one light ray, one image of Shakyamuni Buddha comes to the crown of your head. And then from that white light rays fill your entire body. And the same with all the other sentient beings visualized around you, purifying all of the forms of mental and physical suffering and all the causes of those, purifying all the obscurations to liberation and enlightenment, purifying the environment as well. And then golden light rays radiate out from every pore of Shakyamuni Buddha's holy body and all the objects of refuge. Again, filling your entire body with golden light. And the same with all the other sentient beings. Imagine it seated around you and with the environment, blessing you and all sentient beings to have every form of well-being and happiness and all the realizations of the graduated stages of the path up to full enlightenment. And you become one essence with Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, so we can stop there. Preliminary meditation. So there's a good story. I'll start with it. It's a common story when talking about what is Dharma. So one time, most of you probably know the last great Indian Pandit, or one of the last great Indian Pandits, Indian Buddhist masters to go to Tibet to teach before Buddhism, completely died out in India, was Sri Jana Dipankara, or Lama Atisha. So he's going to Tibet and teaching for about, I don't know, somewhere between 13, 17 years. Then it really was the beginning of a resurgence of Buddhism in Tibet after it had been persecuted and kind of almost totally eliminated by the anti-Buddhist king, Long Dharma. So Atisha went to Tibet and began this kind of renaissance of Buddhism in Tibet, which became known as the Kadampa tradition. So there's many famous Kadampa Geshes, Ka meaning the Buddha's teaching, and Dampa meaning taking that teaching as instruction. Dhamma is a kind of instruction. So it's Kadampas are those beings who, following the example and following the teachings of Lama Atisha, who's from West Bengal, then they see how to take all of the Buddha's different teachings as personal instruction, personal advice. So foremost among Atisha's students was Drom Tempa, Losang Jungner, I believe is his full name. But so there's a story about Drom Tempa that one time he was circumambulating a temple somewhere in, I think probably the Pampo Valley, but somewhere in central Tibet. And he saw an old man to one side of the temple, making prostrations. And Drom Tempa asked him, what are you doing? And the old man said, I'm making prostrations. And then Drom Tempa said, it'd be better if you practice Dharma. And so the old man was kind of confused because he thought he's doing very well practicing Dharma. So then the next day he also started making circumambulations around the temple. And then the next day again, Drom Tempa came by, he met him. And then he asked the old man, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making circumambulations. And Drom Tempa said, it'd be better if you practice Dharma. And again, he's kind of frustrated, confused, because he thought he's being a very good Buddhist, very good practitioner. So then he thought, well, maybe I better read scriptures, recite scripture. So then he sat by the temple, outside reading scriptures out loud, as many Tibetans do. And then again, Drom Tempa came by and said, what are you doing today? He said, today I'm reading scriptures. And Drom Tempa said, it'd be better if you practice Dharma. So finally, in kind of total frustration, kind of fed up, he asked, well, what is it to practice Dharma? And Drom Tempa said, give up this life. So to give up this life then is, according to Drom Tempa, one of the foremost Kadampa Geshes, then that's the meaning of, the essence of practicing Dharma, is to give up this life. So I also heard this, this story, this teaching from my own teachers from very early on when I was a Buddhist, and it's something I've thought about, for a long time. And my understanding of it's kind of changed over the years. So I thought, that's sort of the main theme for my talk today is what does it mean sort of to give up this life? Why is that? Why is that practicing Dharma, just giving up this life? Because definitely it's something, if you tell someone, you should give up this life, it doesn't make much sense at first, like without any context, without any, background understanding, it's difficult to make sense of. So when we consider approaching Dharma, or how to find sort of authentic spiritual practice, what does it mean? What did Drom Tempa mean when he says to this person to give up this life? But maybe before we answer that, then, so when we think about how to practice Dharma, first of all, well, it helps a lot just to define Dharma, right? What do we mean by Dharma? So the Tibetan translation of Dharma is che. So che has two meanings, two main meanings in Tibetan. One is just something that exists. Any phenomena that exists is called a Dharma, a che. But here, when we say, practicing Dharma, we don't mean just exist, right? It has to be something more than that. So But that same word cho also, yeah, is used to refer to the Buddhist teachings, or something sacred as well. The Dhamcho is another phrase in Tibetan, the sacred Dharma, Dhambe cho. So what is, the holy Dharma? So holy Dharma in the sense of being a noun, I mean, something that exists is, the teachings of the Buddha and the whole, well, I mean, there's also the Buddha refuge, right? The Dharma refuge. So in the Dharma refuge, there's two types, right? There's the scriptural teachings of the Buddha, and then there's the realizational teachings of the Buddha. So Dharma can, both be like the word of the Buddha as it's written down in scriptures, but it also can be, the realizations in a person's mind. I mean, it's specifically within the Four Noble Truths, the last two, right? The truth of cessation and the truth of the path. Those are the scriptural realizations, which are the Dharma refuge that's in a person's continuum. The truth of cessation and the truth of the path. But then in another sense, cho can mean, there's a common prayer that's in, where you might have seen it, is in Lama Zopa Rinpoche compiled these prayers to do in the morning. A few years ago it came out. It was called something like How to Transform
Suffering into happiness.
Yeah, suffering into
life.
happiness. Yeah, how to transform suffering life into happiness. Yeah. So in there, I think as part of that collection, there's this one Lamrim prayer by like Losang Jinpa that Rinpoche recommends we say every morning. It's not in verse, it's in prose. And one of the lines right at the beginning of that is, which is a common prayer among Tibetans, is may my mind become the Dharma, may that Dharma become the path, may that path be without obstacles. Right. So how do we that phrase, may my mind become the Dharma, is very much like a Kadampa instruction. Lo Chosudro is it Tibetan. May my mind become the Dharma, or may my mind go into the Dharma. Lo Chosudro. So in that sense, how do we make our mind become the Dharma? As I was saying earlier, it depends largely on our motivation. So generally Dharma, I mean, in terms of like how do our actions become Dharma? It's important to make our mind become Dharma, because every action that we do is either an action of our body, our speech, or our mind, right? There's the three doors of our actions: our body, which are the most coarse kind of actions, and then our speech, which are slightly more subtle sort of actions, verbal actions, in that they arise more quickly from our mind. But both of those, arise from our mind. So whenever we do an intentional action, always we have the intention to do that, the thought to do that action on some level, whether very obvious or more subtle. But even the actions of our mind, even thoughts that we have, they are by having thoughts, especially by intentionally giving rise to thoughts, then we produce karma. So how do our actions of our mind, or actions of our speech, or actions of our body, how do they become Dharma? Well, one definition of Dharma, of Dharma action, is any action that's done with a motivation or motivated by an intention to achieve a state of well-being beyond this life. Right? So the discriminating line, which Atisha laid out in the Lama Atisha, explained in his, at the very beginning of his light on the path to, or it's a lamp on the path to enlightenment, right? Which is the very first Lamrim text. It's the first text that Atisha taught when he came to Tibet, is that he thought, as long as your motivation for doing an action is to achieve some kind of happiness in this life, and then we can add the caveat for yourself alone. That's just a worldly action, right? So any activity we do motivated by, just out of selfish concern for ourselves alone to achieve some kind of well-being, whether it's nice food, wealth, reputation. Think of the 8 worldly dharmas, right? So reputation, praise from others, approval from others, pleasant sensations of our things that we see, pleasant sounds, pleasant sensations of the body, tastes, touch, status, our wealth, of course, possessions. So any action that we do that's motivated merely by the desire to have some kind of well-being for oneself in this life. In this life alone, it's considered a worldly activity or worldly dharma. So not the holy dharma. Whereas if any action that's motivated by a wish to achieve not just well-being in this life, but a state of well-being that transcends this life. So in future lives, right? So if we have a motivation to achieve a good future rebirth, or some kind of positive state, realizations, to meet with our teachers, meet with the holy dharma, meet with loved ones in future lives. Let's consider dharma. Although that's the lowest level of dharma, it's a motivation of a person on the small scope to avoid taking rebirth in a suffering state, in the hells, or as a hungry ghost, as an animal, or in an unfortunate condition, even as a human being. So to avoid a suffering, a state of misery in future lives, whereby we cannot practice our chosen spiritual path, and rather just take a fortunate rebirth in which we have intelligence, we have safety, we have access to spiritual teachings, and we have the capacity to be able to practice those. So when any action in this life of our thought or of our speech, of our body, that's motivated by, at the very least, to achieve a state of well-being and happiness in future lives, is considered dharma. And then, of course, beyond that, so just thinking about ourselves right now. So beyond that, if we are motivated by the wish to achieve freedom from samsara, and thereby, anything we do, whether we, getting up in the morning, cleaning, eating, talking to others, going to work, anything we do, if it's motivated by the thought, in the long term, may this lead to my being able to become free from samsara, free from the process of taking birth, and then aging, becoming ill, dying, and then taking rebirth again and again through the force of karma and afflictive emotions, at the root of which is selfishness and ignorance, grasping at a self existing from its own side. So may I, by whatever I do today. So that's why it's so important to generate a positive motivation in the morning, in that it becomes a causal motivation for transforming all of our actions in the day into something that, just by merely generating the aspiration, by doing all the things I'm going to do today, may all these somehow, we don't have to know how, but somehow may they all contribute to my, eventually being free from samsara. And then beyond that is the aspiration to achieve full enlightenment. And of course, the aspiration to achieve a full enlightenment shouldn't be just to achieve one's own welfare alone, but should be, in order to thinking about the welfare of all other sentient beings, in order that one can be the best possible servant to all sentient beings and do whatever one possibly can to accomplish the welfare of all sentient beings. So that's bodhicitta motivation. But back to just the first level of motivation to achieve happiness in future lives. Well, there's a big question, right? So if someone doesn't believe in future lives, past and future lives, then does that mean they can't possibly practice Dharma and everything they do? Because Atisha says, which is, something to think about, is that everything we do motivated by the wish to achieve happiness in this life is non-virtuous and only becomes a cause for suffering in the lower realms. It's very heavy. So, heavy statements like that, we don't have to just accept at face value or say, oh, that must be right because he's Atisha and he knows. But rather we should question, like, is that really true or not? Why or why not? How? But back to, just back to the more simple question, Because it doesn't, I mean, doesn't it strike you as wrong that someone who doesn't believe in past and future lives, that everything they do becomes just a cause of suffering in this life or a cause of suffering in future lives? Aren't there many good people who don't believe in past and future lives? Can you be a very good person, a kind-hearted person, a helpful person, someone who's very beneficial to, others, without believing in past and future lives? Definitely, you can. Of course you can. So then what about all those people who don't believe in future lives, and thereby they never generate a motivation to achieve, a state of well-being for themselves in future lives? Is it that they're destined for the lower realms? No, definitely not. No. So this is where we come to another way of defining Dharma. So one way of defining Dharma, right, is that, as I said, the one we've been speaking about, is that any action motivated by, at the very least, an aspiration to achieve well-being for oneself in future lives, right? And then beyond that, freedom from samsara, beyond that, enlightenment. But another way of defining Dharma, which I much prefer, which I find is much more helpful actually, is any action of body, speech, or mind that goes against the afflictive emotions, right? So the afflictive emotions being, there's a the three root afflictive emotions: anger. So of course, anger is commonly recognized, by anyone as something. Well, not anyone, I should say, but in most, religions, in most societies, by most people, we can recognize how destructive anger is. Destroys one's own happiness when you yourself are angry. When other people are angry at you, also destroys your happiness. When we're angry at other people, also destroys, friendships, destroys relationships, leads to a lot of problems, right? Even physical problems, even heart congestion, heart failure, shorter life. There's many studies, that scientific studies, just objective, not Buddhist studies, just objective studies on people's health, that people who have more incidents, more frequently are angry at others, then they have weaker social support networks, weaker relationships with others. And the anger itself, you can feel how, it causes a lot of stress in the body. It causes stress on the heart. It causes you to have higher blood pressure. Higher blood pressure causes all other kinds of, physical problems. And so people who have more instances of anger, they have shorter lives. Also, people who are more lonely, they tend to have shorter lives. Yeah, so these three root afflictions, though, anger is the most obvious. Then attachment is much more difficult to identify and reduce. But attachment is, again, it's fundamentally a selfish concern, wanting to get what I like, what I feel like brings me pleasure, brings me enjoyment. And having a very unrealistic expectation that things outside of ourselves are going to bring us enjoyment, that, wealth or pleasant sensations from food or clothes or praise from others, that those things they inherently have the power from their own side to bring me pleasure. So attachment, anger, and then self-grasping, right? Ignorance, grasping at ourself and others as existing and inherent, existing by their own power from their own side. So another way to define Dharma is any action that goes against the afflictive emotions, because the afflictive emotions are the source of all of our suffering. Afflictive emotion is termed nyomon in Tibetan, but the definition is basically, doesn't even have to be an emotion, really. It's more like any thought or any thought, or we can say like a mental event almost. Any thought, well, we can say just thought or emotion that when it arises in our continuum, it disturbs the peace of our mind. Right? So there again, we have to check, is that always the case or not? But any thought or emotion that we can add, though, that arises from an incorrect way of engaging its object and disturbs the peace of our mind on a subtle or very gross level. Like anger, again, it very obviously disturbs the peace of our mind. It's the most obviously disturbing afflictive emotion. Attachment, much less so, because it feels pleasant, right? But the way attachment disturbs our mind is it gives us a sense of not being content with what we have, having a source of a kind of discontentment and a feeling of being impoverished, needing something else to be happy. So a sort of dissatisfaction. And then more subtle than attachment is selfishness, because it seems like it's working for our own welfare. And more subtle than that even is this fundamental wrong view of the way ourselves and others exist, right? Grasping, self-grasping, or is it ignorance grasping at inherent existence, or grasping at things existing from their own side. So the way that disturbs our mind is very, very subtle, very difficult to identify. But so Dharma is anything that goes against the afflictive emotion. So can there be people who don't believe, back to our question, can someone who doesn't believe in future lives, past and future lives, can they practice Dharma? Can they do something that goes against the afflictive emotions? Yeah. Yes, like what?
Helping an old lady cross the road.
Yeah, helping an old lady cross the road, protecting, saving an ant out of the toilet bowl, and when you get angry, holding your tongue, because you realize you might say something that'll hurt someone's feelings, practicing patience. Anytime we practice concern for others, doing anything, we try not to harm others, try to benefit, someone else. That's all Dharma, because it all goes against, anger or against not caring about others. I mean, this is where it's very helpful to identify how both attachment and anger arise from selfish concern, self-centered concern. So anything we do in order to benefit others, whether to protect them from harm or whether to help them, be happy somehow, that's all Dharma, because it all goes against being selfish and self-centered. Right? So that's why I say that one I find, when you compare thinking, okay, for something to be Dharma, it has to be done with a motivation to achieve happiness in future lives. For most of us to generate that motivation, it has to be, we have to put some effort. It just doesn't come easily and naturally. Where for most people, I think, to care about others, to want to do something to help others, to try to prevent others from being harmed, that comes quite naturally because we're human, we're social creatures. We know that we appreciate when other people care about us, when other people try to help us, when other people, try to help protect us from harm. We naturally appreciate that, and we naturally see the benefit of being in that way, acting in that way towards others. So that one comes quite easily in a way. So that's all. So all of those kind of, any thoughts or any action of our speech, any action of our body, which goes against selfishness, that's Dharma. If it goes against anger and intolerance and impatience, it's Dharma. If it goes against discontentment, like, I don't know, if someone has just, chapati and sabji laid out for lunch and they say, oh, well, do you need some dal? Do you need some, some sweet after? And you're like, no, it's okay. It's enough. That's Dharma in a way. It's practicing contentment. Even though you might have in your mind, yeah, it would be nice to have, some halwa or something. But you think, oh, I don't want to put them to trouble. So you just say, no, it's okay. In a way that's going against attachment, isn't it? It's going against selfish concerns, being concerned about the other person. It's Dharma. So that also is kind of Dharma. Yeah, there's so many ways, talk about how to approach Dharma. So the first question here is, well, what is Dharma? So again, Dharma, there's two ways to define. One way to define Dharma is any action of our body, speech, and mind, which is motivated by at least the wish to achieve well-being and happiness in future lives, or if we can beyond that, to achieve our own liberation from samsara. If we can beyond that, to achieve full enlightenment in order to be of the greatest benefit for others. So that's one way. Another way is to, any action of body, speech, and mind, that goes against our afflictive emotions, specifically, against anger and intolerance, aversion, against sort of craving, attachment, craving at pleasures, and having this unrealistic expectation that that happiness will somehow come from objects outside of us, right? Be given to us by, especially through pleasures of the five senses, and then especially goes against selfish concern, selfishness. And then beyond that, if we can, this becomes a little more subtle, and I won't talk too much in this talk, but if we can have a mindfulness of interdependence, that all things are interdependently arising, and nothing exists in and of itself and independent of other things by its own power, but rather everything that exists independence upon causes and conditions, or independence upon its many parts, and especially independence upon imputation by a mind which labels this is this is that. So that kind of mindfulness also goes against the most fundamental afflictive emotion, ignorance. So then how to practice each day, so that as a Dharma practitioner, we want the best thing is that everything we can do day and night becomes Dharma, because we have this opportunity now as a human being who's not taking rebirth in the hell realms, where we'd be completely, our lives would be completely oppressed by suffering day and night. As you can see, people caught in a place in the world where there's severe drought, severe poverty, severe hunger, severe disease, where just the daily, getting your daily sustenance, finding enough food to eat, to feed your children, to sustain your own survival day to day as a struggle. How do you have space in your, how do you have energy on the one hand? Other people who are very, very ill, either ill with hunger and thirst or just ill with disease. You can see when we ourselves become, have a high fever, have cold symptoms, aches and pains in the body, upset stomach, headache. Can we practice Dharma at that time? Almost impossible, really, really difficult. No? So you can imagine being born in the hell realm is like, exponentially more suffering than that. Of course, there's no way you can practice Dharma when you have so much suffering. The same with being born as a hunger ghost, being born as an animal. Some animals, we see some cats and dogs have quite privileged lives, have a lot of free time, not much hardship, quite safe. But unfortunately, they don't have intelligence, no? So they can't understand. Even they listen to Buddha's teachings day and night, they can't understand. They don't have the mental capacity to think about, like, why was I born? What's going to happen after I die? What's the best thing I can do with my life? Rather, they just follow their instincts, in all their behaviors. So now we're not born in one of those states. We're born as a human being. And then within a human being, we're not someone who's totally disinterested in anything, any spiritual practice, or someone who's a total cynic or a thorough materialist, thinking that, everything is reducible just to atoms and particles, and Newtonian physics. And so everything that happens is fundamentally predestined. We have no real free will. So we're not afflicted by wrong views, but rather we have some interest in spiritual teachings in general. Within that, we somehow, met the Buddhist teachings. And so we have opportunity to put them into practice. And so we have opportunity to, transform our motivation in any time of the day, any time of the night. And thereby we have our opportunity to transform our actions from being actions that are done just for my own, just out of self-interest, for my own self, just for my own welfare alone, or just for this life alone. And we have the aspiration. we can do the same actions, we still do the same kind of washing, same kind of cleaning, same kind of cooking, same kind of work. But if our reason for doing things is transformed, then the efficacy, the power that those actions have to bring about well-being in the future completely changes. Right? That's why Lama Zopa's this compilation of different prayers, mantras and prayers and contemplations called Transforming Suffering Life into Happiness. It's not that he says, we all need to, leave our families and become celibate and take ordination and shave your heads and live in a monastery. That's not the instruction. The instruction is just to change your motivation, fundamentally. So, so then what are some ways to, some of the most effective ways to change your motivation? So there's three different techniques that Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whenever he comes to the monastery, Sarah, to give teachings and advice, since I've been there, he almost always emphasizes these three ways of thinking to change our motivation. So one is to, one is to think about impermanence and death, right? To reflect on death, because that cuts off our attachment to just this life and reminds us that, death is going to come. And after that, there is some state of existence beyond that. Now, if that's something we're not clear about, we have to think about all the reasons why there might be or not be future life. But just taking that for granted now that there are, then thinking about the fact of death and how traumatic it will be. It's traumatic enough just to sometimes leave home and go out on the metro to go to some other part of the city. Not to mention to leave your home completely, move from one home to another house. Not to mention move from one country or one continent to a completely different continent. But even in that situation, you still have contact with all the, your parents and your family. You can talk to them through WhatsApp and you have the same body at least. But can you imagine to leave everyone behind and you're never going to see them again, and also leave this body behind and you'll never be in contact with this body again? It's quite radical. It'd be really, really difficult to do, especially because it's something we've never ever done before in memory, right? So when we think about the fact that we're going to transition from this life into another life, then naturally it causes us to want to make preparations for that. And so on top of that, if we believe in karma, the law of cause and effect, that the reason we have fortunate or unfortunate experiences is as a result of our own actions, right? Because of our own virtuous actions which are beneficial to ourselves, beneficial to others, thereby we create positive or virtuous karma, and thereby we have fortunate events, fortunate things happen to us. And when we harm others and do things that are destructive for ourselves, destructive for others, that we create karma such that we experience harm, being harmed by others, sickness, disease, being born, and having a habit to want to harm others, so forth in the future. So with an understanding of karma, combined with understanding that death is imminent, then it causes us to put effort into generating positive motivation for all of the actions we engage in. So these three things Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasizes to transform our actions into Dharma. One is think about impermanence and death and how future lives are coming, and we don't know when. It could come tomorrow, the next day, and thereby whatever we do, to do with an aspiration that it becomes a cause for my well-being in future lives. And then the second is to whatever we do, do with the intention that it becomes somehow beneficial to others, right? So this goes against selfishness, right? So to think beyond one's selfish concern and think whatever I'm doing today, may it all become a cause to somehow benefit others. Do we have to know how exactly it's going to benefit others? No, but if we have that intention as we go about our daily activities, then naturally, we're more sensitive, we're more aware of how what we're doing affects others, and so naturally, we're more careful not to do things that harm others, and we're more aware when there are opportunities to do things which might benefit those that we come into contact with. So the second is to see ourselves as a servant of others, right? And think that, may I use my life to benefit others. And then the third is to think of everything we're doing as an offering to our gurus, right? Lama Zopa Rinpoche likes to emphasize this point, which many other lamas don't emphasize so strongly. Probably almost no other lama I know of emphasizes so strongly that the highest object of offering is the guru, because the guru is an embodiment of the Buddha, of all the Buddhas, and the Dharma and the Sangha in a way that we can see and we can relate to, and thereby they're more beneficial to us than all the Buddhas, because they actually guide us on the path, and therefore they're a more powerful object of offering, more powerful object of karma in general. So it's always a double-edged sword, right? So whatever we do, non-virtuous in relation to the guru, it's extremely heavy. Whatever we do virtuous in relation to the guru, it's extremely powerful, in a good way. So if another way to make all of our actions become causes of well-being and happiness in the future, become virtuous and also go against our afflictive emotions, is to think of all of our actions from morning till night as being an offering to the guru. Think I'm doing this as and the highest, and there's different kinds of offering to the guru, but among there's three different kinds, I believe. There's material offerings, offering of service, and offering of practice. Right? So the highest type of offering to the guru is offering of practice, which means acting in accordance with the guru's advice, our teacher's advice. So that's the third way. So there's these three: reflecting on impermanence and death as a preliminary to anything we do, and thereby generating aspiration. What we do becomes a cause for happiness in future lives. And then remembering. So why? And then the second, thinking of anything, generating the aspiration that whatever we do become beneficial to others. So why? Because independence upon thinking how other sentient beings have been kind to us, right? Thinking of others' kindness to us, how our very body comes from our parents, all the food we've eaten is produced by other, independence upon other sentient beings. The air we breathe comes from the environment, the water we drink. Someone shared a file in here. I think it might be the, I hope it'd be good to share that text by Rinpoche that I keep mentioning.
The morning prayer.
Oh, someone shared a medicine Buddha, so I'm not sure. No, that transforming suffering into happiness. Yeah. I didn't think of mentioning actually. I've already been talking for an hour. Okay, I'll stop. I think I'll stop soon. I'll just mention a couple other things. Okay. Yeah. Here, I was planning to go into so much more detail about all those things. Yeah, time does fly. I was going to stop 10 minutes ago, actually, planning to. But so that's one way to approach Dharma, right? The main thing, approaching Dharma, well, there's so much other things to say. I'll just mention a few of the other things I had in mind, and then let's see where your questions take us, right? But a whole different way to approach, to think about how to approach Dharma is actually according to a couple lines in the Abhisamaya Lamkara by Maitreya Buddha, where he says, so this His Holiness often recommends that for people who have a modern education and a modern outlook on things and have a very rational kind of approach to life, to things, that they follow this kind of Maitreya's advice to first understand the two truths, and then independence upon understanding the two truths, one understands the Four Noble Truths. Independence upon understanding the Four Noble Truths, one can understand the meaning of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So this is a very important, it's very important kind of progression from understanding the two truths, understanding the Four Noble Truths, and then understanding the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So His Holiness usually discusses this in the context of how how he's talked to many Tibetans who, they're Buddhist by birth. They have great faith in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And then he would ask them, like, well, what is the Buddha? Is it the same as God? And they say, yeah, it's the same as God. Just same thing, which is totally wrong, right? So many people who have a lot of faith in Buddhism and the Buddha Dharma Sangha, but they don't have a clear idea about actually what is the Buddha, what is the Dharma, what is the Sangha. So the way to understand the Buddha really is as the teacher of the Dharma. But what does he teach? He taught the Four Noble Truths, right? So, and why is that significant? It's because by only understanding and realizing the Four Noble Truths can you be free from suffering. So that's why the Buddha is an unmistaken teacher, because from his own experience, he unmistakably taught the Four Noble Truths, right? The first truth, the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, discuss how we are trapped in samsara, right? How we're trapped in rebirth, and how, what are the afflictive or the distorted concepts and emotions that we have that cause us to grasp at this self that doesn't exist and serve that self, and then take rebirth again and again. How that leads to suffering, and then the truth of cessation and the truth of the path, the later two of the four, they show us how it is possible to bring an end to that whole thing. And then what's the path to do that, how to do that. So, right, so the Buddha, he's a valid teacher because he taught a valid path, right, in the Four Noble Truths. But then understanding of the Four Noble Truths, especially the truth of suffering, why is it possible actually to bring an end to samsara? Because in some ways it seems like, unlikely. Is it really possible we can stop dying, stop taking rebirth and stop experiencing death again and again? It's something hard to imagine because we've never been there. We've never done that. And is it for real? So it's something we have to check. You can only understand actually why that's possible by understanding the two truths, right? Ultimate truth and conventional truth. And how it's due to our misunderstanding of how things fundamentally exist, that we have a distorted idea about how things exist, which we've had since beginningless time. And then we have this distorted perception that there's somehow kind of a real self, a concrete kind of I that just is there by its own power. It's always been there and it always will be there. And my purpose in life is to serve that thing, that sense of self. And thereby everyone else and everything else is less important, right? So, and then on that, and by the basis of that, then anger, attachment, everything else, the whole other the whole other mess kind of arises. So that's another way to approach Dharma, is by first understanding the two truths, then understanding the Four Noble Truths, and then understanding how the Buddha Dharma Sangha have the power to protect us from suffering. But those are both, okay, those are both kind of, classical, a little bit intellectual sort of ways of approaching the Dharma. But then there's a whole other just our personal experience, right? Each of us are different individuals. We have different propensities, different inclinations, different interests, different kind of karma, different way of connecting with people and places, and our body, our mind, and what's meaningful to us. We each have a different sense of what is sacred, of what's meaningful, of what's significant, for me. And one has to be aware that your own personal inclinations, your own personal disposition, what inspires you, what disappoints you, and not be afraid to embrace that, right? To recognize that is how I am. That's the kind of what I came into this world with. That's what I approve of. That's what I consider right and just and good. So we each have our own sense of what's good, what's right, what's meaningful. And then we have to see how that, does Buddhism represent that for us or not? I remember, when I think, anyway, but when I first met Buddhism, it very clicked for me. I mean, that's kind of why I became a Buddhist monk, because I had a lot of ideas about how, because I grew up in a Christian family, and a lot of things about the whole Christian belief system really rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like. And so I was looking for something else, some other belief system that matched kind of my own innate sense of what makes sense in the world and how to make sense of my life and in the world. And then when the Buddhist ideas of like everything's interconnected make sense, and that you experience things because of actions you've done in the past also made a lot more sense to me. And then every sentient being is equal in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. Again, makes sense. And every sentient being has the potential, for full enlightenment, and that should be kind of the most important thing in our life, is trying to actualize our own potential for full enlightenment in order to be of the greatest benefit to others. And that really made a lot of sense to me, and really was totally, actually, that was totally beyond anything I'd imagined before. So that really impressed me about Buddha's teachings. So anyway, do you have any questions or comments? We have just 5-10 minutes left. So what do you think? Does that make sense? A way to approach Dharma?
I'm glad you went beyond the Atisha quote.
Yeah, I didn't come back. I was going to come back to the Atisha quote. No, give up this life.
Rinpoche really hammers that one.
Yeah, he
You feel that
does.
Rinpoche starts on that one.
Yeah, you feel like, is it okay though if I go have ice cream afterwards, or is that I can't do that anymore?
With respect to the two definitions you talked about, first definition saying that you think about the future lifetimes, right? And second definition is more about now, present. Right? I thought there's some contradiction between the two, because in the first one we're talking about future lifetimes and we're thinking we'll get better rebirth. So it's more about us, more self-centered attitude there. But when you're talking about helping others, it's about others, right? So there's sort of contradiction between the two definitions.
No, it's true. And can't you be attached to happiness in future lives? So doesn't that it seems like it could be Dharma by that definition, and yet not go against the afflictive emotions. In a way, and it's true. I mean, so yeah, those are the kind of things we have to, have to debate.
I think it's sort of like a trick, because you can't have happiness in future lives if you're not, if you're acting with anger and attachment. So the first option cannot happen unless you're going by the second option.
So why is that? That you can't have happiness in future lives if you act with anger? Okay, that's easy. With attachment,
then you're generating, you're doing non-virtuous actions, so you're not going to have a
karma,
good rebirth anyways.
Yeah.
So I guess both those ways, to some people, the first might appeal, which will be motivating, to do virtuous actions, and then to some people, the second option might appeal, but you can't have the first unless.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For that to make sense, that something becomes Dharma, if you're concerned about future lives, it has to be combined with your understanding of karma. Because if you're really concerned about, achieving happiness in future lives, well, you have to check, well, what is it that becomes a cause for happiness in future lives? And then that brings you back to the law of karma, that it's my actions. So my actions that are harmful to others, then they cause negative karma. My actions that are beneficial to others largely cause positive karma. But I don't know, it almost seems it's really hard to eliminate attachment from the picture, because it almost seems like you could still be attached to creating positive karma or something. Any aspiration we have for something good, our attachment is so slippery and so tricky. It always kind of slips in there.
And also, I feel if we keep thinking about future lifetimes, lifetime after lifetime, we are eliminating the opportunity or the possibility of achieving liberation, right? Because we are always stuck in that I'm working for my future lifetime. I'm working for my future. The attachment comes in, and then you don't have the chance to liberate.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, who is this person that's so concerned about happiness in their future lifetimes? It doesn't seem like a kind of attitude a modern person we would have now. But you can kind of imagine people who, I don't know. I don't know. I think, that level of motivation, it is the lowest of those. So it is, makes more sense, to try to think about all of samsara. But if you don't have a correct understanding of what samsara is, Like, for example, there are many people who don't have, I mean, a correct understanding of what samsara is, but like, like in the Christian view, there's no idea of like samsara created by karma, but there is an idea of heaven that you can go to if you like follow God's will by abandoning the 10 commandments. I mean, by following the 10 commandments, right? Which is abandon, not to kill, not to steal, not lie, for example. So you could have an idea, and then by doing that, you go to heaven, right? So there is an idea of, they're not thinking, happiness in future lives, but essentially what their belief system would lead them to is essentially that. So I think you have to kind of be creative. Who is that person? But you're right. I mean, that if we have an understanding of samsara, we should aspire for something greater than that. And all of those, well, okay, wishing for happiness in future lives or wishing for liberation from sorrow, those can both be just for yourself alone. But as soon as you think about aspiring to enlightenment, that should be by virtue, for the well-being of others.
Geshe, everything we've mentioned so far is marked by duality, right? We don't have realization of emptiness. So it's just like getting a better birth in samsara.
Yeah.
That is also Dharma, obviously, but it's kind of limited.
Yeah.
And there's one other thing which I'd like to advise on. One teacher, actually Dhamma Rinpoche, says that in reality, our mind has never been separate from the Guru in one sense. So it's our ignorance that thinks we're separate, that our mind is separate from the Guru. What do you think about that? Is that a overly Nyingma interpretation of the Guru? Because we speak of devotion to the Guru. Now what is the Guru? Who is the Guru?
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, it's difficult. What is the Guru? Well, Lama Zopa Rinpoche usually says the best description of the Guru is, in the Lama Chopa, those last two, when you make requests to the Guru, the last two verses, there. And there, the last one, it's more looking at the Guru as being like, I mean, essentially the Guru, you can think of in terms of, the four bodies of a Buddha. So, of course, the emanation body and the enjoyment body are just emanations for the benefit of sentient beings, the appearances of sentient beings. So the essence of the Guru is more the nature truth body and the wisdom truth body, right? And within those, the nature truth body, of course, the wisdom truth body, like we have the potential for that. We've never been separated from the potential for that. So that's one way of looking at, we've never been separated from. But the nature truth body, in a way, it's like, of course, we don't have the nature truth body, but we already have that ultimate truth. I mean, there is an ultimate truth of us. We already are, from beginningless time, we're empty of inherent existence. And we've always been like that. We always will be like that. And the emptiness of inherent existence of our person that we are now, when we become enlightened, that will become the nature truth body of a Buddha, right? So that's already very close, and the Buddha's emptiness of inherent existence is one entity with our emptiness of inherent existence. They're exactly the same. It's just like this one taste that pervades all things. So in that case, in that sense, and that is really the ultimate nature of the Buddha, I mean, of the Guru. So in that sense, we've never been separated from the Guru. Yeah. But you had a question or comment?
You have also mentioned quite a lot of time the happiness. In Buddhist psychology or the Buddhist philosophy, any term that we are using, there's a definition. Could you define happiness in a very explicit way? Yeah. Not in a very elusive. Yeah. Because it's something as if it is there. Yeah. But one is not really knowing what it is. Yeah. So can you give explicit definition of happiness? Yeah. And if necessarily, not necessarily, I think any text which has really referred, what is this happiness? Yeah.
Please answer well, because he keeps on asking this question.
No, it's an excellent question. No, it's an excellent question, because actually it's one of the, I mean, first of all, hold on. You started out by saying in Buddhism, every definition is well defined.
No, every term.
Every term.
Using,
No, sorry. Yeah, every term is well defined. Yeah. But that's not the case. There are many terms we use that are not well defined,
Like, for instance.
like happiness.
Yeah, that is what it is. Yeah.
No, but I can give you, usually, I mean, because I don't know, do you speak Tibetan? No, a little.
Yes.
Like kipu, in Tibetan is the word
Yeah.
kipu. Kipu do ye. Kipu. Kipu is not something, it's like a colloquial term that's never defined. So usually when we look for a term to define, we'll say dewa.
But people is only colloquial.
Dewa.
The Deva is less.
Yeah, dewa is more like a technical scriptural term. So dewa, we usually consider as, well, there's, I mean, in Tantra, Sutra and Tantra, there's different kinds of dewa also. There's many different varieties of dewa. Just as in, I mean, I think it's to make it more relative, because you're saying you want something, well, explicit, but I think also practical. We have to look at our own experience of happiness. I mean, that's the best way to understand, is to look at different kinds of happiness we experience. And we see in our experience, we have all different varieties, you know,
Well,
some very superficial and some very like profound, some that are, there's something not comfortable about them, and some that we feel like we could just abide in that state forever, right? There's all different kinds of it. Some from like the affection we have with, you know, friends and family, which is one of the deepest, or some just from the pleasure of, you know, nice food or praise from other people, which is very unstable. But generally, happiness is defined as tsorwa dewa, a pleasant feeling. Pleasant feeling of the body or pleasant feeling of the mind. Which is, yeah, that's very general. I think that kind of fits, but it doesn't give you much, no?
no,
It's
doesn't
just,
give that,
but many definitions are like that in Buddhist philosophy, that they, because the function of the definition is to divide out what is that from what is not that. But many of the definitions, they don't really give you like some taste for what that thing is. So with happiness, to get a taste of what it is, we have to look at our own
I
experience.
think the definition not necessary to give. I think definition can be inclusive also.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah,
if what is
No.
bodhicitta is defined, it's an inclusive.
I'm coming back to
So I
you.
think,
Sorry, Geshe, I've been reminded there are some questions online,
Oh, really? Okay.
because they also have numbers.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, you online people here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so we can just take a couple questions from Zoom. Thank you, Geshe. Anushri, did you want to ask first? Sorry, I'll just unmute you.
Oh yeah, I see the hands up now. There's virtual hands here.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Anushri.
Okay. Yeah, hello, Geshe. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so there are a couple of questions. The first one which came to my mind was regarding the nature of happiness, because we were just discussing it right now. So what would you say, like, for instance, in the Vedic system, it is considered like happiness is defined as something which is constant, like which never decreases, the happiness which we experience in this world, you know, like this, suffering of change, for instance, it is continuously diminishing. The moment I eat a pizza, from the next bite, with each successive bite, the happiness or the satisfaction which I derive while eating it is diminishing, right? So a true happiness would be something which is stable, which lasts and which increases continuously. So what about that? Would you like to say something about that? Is there something similar in Buddhism also?
Yes, yeah, there's something similar. But generally we use happiness more in the kind of ordinary way to cover all different kinds of things, both things that something can be both happiness and the truth of suffering, right? In Buddhism. So, I mean, actually everything, happiness and the truth of suffering, but I meant to say, of the three kinds of suffering, right? The suffering of suffering, that's always an unpleasant sensation, right? So that would never call happiness. But the suffering of change, which, as you alluded to, are these pleasant sensations which become dissatisfactory, or they transform into an unpleasant experience, like eating pizza can. So yeah, those are by nature a pleasant sensation, right? At the outset, the suffering of change is always a pleasant sensation, pleasant experience. So that we'd call happiness, although it's called a contaminated happiness, right? Because it arises through the force of karma, which is produced by ignorance, right? Ignorance, which is apprehends things in a way that they don't exist. Whereas a pure sort of happiness, like to use your terminology, would be, the happiness of a Buddha. It's a happiness that arises continually and, without end, everlasting. But that would have to arise from a correct understanding of reality. So when you understand, dependent arising and emptiness of things existing by their own power, and then everything that arises from that, and then through the force of that, you have love for others, you have compassion for others, you have generosity, all of those positive qualities of the mind, when they're underpinned by wisdom, correctly understand reality, then they can exist, they can arise spontaneously and continuously and without end. So that would be like pure happiness.
Yeah, So can I ask another question?
I don't think it'd be fair to let me take another from one of the other people in the Zoom room, and then if there's time, we'll come back.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
Neerajla, are you there? Yeah. Go ahead.
I think you're muted, Neerajji.
Neeraj, we can't hear your audio. You're unmuted, but we can't hear your audio. Might be an issue.
Maybe you can type your question in the chat box. There's one question in the chat box. Geshe-la, you mentioned earlier on that attachment and ignorance are similar in a way. Could you please say a bit more on it? How are attachment and ignorance similar?
Arises from ignorance.
Yes, that's true, but that wouldn't be a way that they're similar. How are they similar? How are attachment and ignorance similar? Yes, that way that's similar. Meaning when they arise in the mind, they disturb the peace of the mind. Yeah, that way they're similar. They also are distorted in the way they apprehend the object. They apprehend their object in a distorted way. Yeah, it's good to be aware of how that correlation between our mind apprehending an object in a distorted way, in a way that's not in tune with reality, and that causing unhappiness in us. I mean, it means like for us to have happiness, internal harmony, we have to perceive the world in a way that's in harmony with the world. Niraj, have you figured out your audio system there yet? Sure.
He asked in the chat. Geshe-la, he asked in the chat his question.
Okay. Okay. I'll come back. Yes, please.
The first option in which, we're talking about like what your deeds are where we are concerned about other people. For me, an interesting realization happened early on when I used to come here years ago was we say this aspiration that may all sentient beings be happy. And one of the things that happened was like, and I think Kabirji emphasizes things like being kind to yourself. And so one of the things was like, oh, I'm also a sentient being. So I'm also included in this aspiration.
Yeah, for sure.
So, just the question about balancing, like, when is it a selfish act and when am I just being kind to myself? Like, how does one work through that?
And when am I just following attachment? When am I doing something that actually I need to do to sustain myself, because we need enjoyment, we need relaxation, we need, to enjoy things. If we don't enjoy life, how are we going to help others enjoy life? If we just go around being a miserable kind of stoic, like we're not going to have much good effect on others. So yeah, that's true. How to do that? I don't know. I think it's one of those, it's like fine tuning a musical instrument. You have to see, you have to always be mindful. Like, when is it that I really do need some kind of creatured comforts, and I do need just to spend time for myself. I mean, even just doing our prayers well, doing meditation well, requires us to remove ourselves from other people's company, which some people might not like. They might find it being selfish, especially if you're in a big family and a household where, you're visiting home or something, and, your parents expect you to spend time with them. but you have to be aware, like, am I kind of sitting in my room doing my meditation just because I really don't like being around my parents and I want an excuse? Or am I doing it because no, I realize like I'm gonna hurt them if I don't like spend some time just by myself. I'm gonna be resentful about that. And so I really need to do this. And then by doing this, I'll be better company with them. I can be more present and more helpful with them. So it's just, and there's many different situations where I just have to check. That's why it's so important. This always check your motivation. It's kind of advice. Always, it's really true. We always have to check, you know, why am I doing this again and again? Okay, so let me see if I can find Yeraji's question. Another is Tara ascending. Geshe-la, okay. Is it possible to bypass karma and effect of karmic conditions? That's your question? Is it possible to bypass cause and effect of karmic conditions? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Is it possible to bypass? How would you bypass? Do you have a suggestion? Do you have a way around?
Surgery, heart surgery.
Oh, or maybe by the power of by the force of a powerful God. Yeah. You know, in a way, it's almost like, I mean, it sounds kind of funny in a way. I mean, generally, the karma, the law of cause and effect, is considered like a natural law. It's not something that, you know, someone says, oh, it should be this way, or there's some kind of judge, you know, weighing our actions and deciding, oh, this is good and this is bad, and thereby I'm going to punish you for this and I'll reward you for that. It's not like that. It's just as a natural, you know, well, I mean, the best analogy is always like planting crops in a field. If you plant, you know, mustard seed in a field, what's going to grow is mustard seed. If you plant rice seeds in a field, what's going to grow is rice, you know, seedlings. So it's just a natural law. It's not. So if you do actions that are, you know, benevolent, beneficial for yourself and others in that moment, then you'll experience results that are similarly beneficial, and vice versa. So in that way, there's no way around. Although the one way, if you know, we always try to look for an exception to the rule, might be like a holy image, like an image of the Buddha or a stupa or something. It said even if you do an action in relation to a holy image, a holy object, with no motivation whatsoever, just a neutral motivation, it produces a root of virtue and a positive result. And then I swear, I've asked other scholars and they say, yes, you definitely saw that, but I don't remember where I saw it and I haven't been able to find it yet. But I'm pretty sure it says in one sutra, even if you look at an image of the Buddha with anger, so even you have a non-virtuous motivation and you do something with regard to a holy object, still in dependence on the, you know, the inconceivable prayers and dedications of a Buddha, you create some kind of root of virtue and the cause to become liberated and enlightened. So there is kind of a workaround there. Yes, Manoti. Let's make this the last question. I think we're going quite over time.
Is there some way that, you know, I understand anger and I felt anger, so I know what it feels like and how it feels in your mind, in your body. But sometimes to get people to get their attention for the benefit of other people, you have to show a wrathful side. You know, just for example, we're having a school event, and the little children are there, and they really want to present something to their parents. And we have given enough notice to the parents and said, no phones are allowed, don't bring your phones, and then we even go around checking them and say, while your child is doing what they are for 1.5 hours, don't pick up your phone. Have this one parent, despite all this, takes his phone and starts talking in the middle of his child putting together something for them. And these are small children, 4.5, 5 years old. And it does hurt the child. You know, all of them want their parents' attention or the grandparents' attention. And you've done everything you can, from sending notices and everything. And then the only way around there is to just stop the program and say, I'm taking it. And you know, you actually have to stop and say, can I have your phone? And there is, I would say there's anger, but there is a certain firmness.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does one,
Yeah.
one
Yeah, no, it's true. You do have to be wrathful, firm, sometimes. I mean, we see it all the time in the monastery. The discipline of the monastery, that's like his default mode, is to be like quite firm and wrathful with the monks. I mean, really, like, so I had a similar question once, because there was, in the monks, I live in a house with, between 5 and I don't know, 7 other monks usually. So there was one monk in the house that no matter how I thought about him, I just cannot like that person. I just don't like them, And I really thought, like, I felt very bad, like, but then I thought, do I really have to like everyone? And it's not like I just didn't like him because, he smells bad or something. It's like so many, the way he treat other people, the way he talks, the way he acts, I just felt like so arrogant, inappropriate, selfish, like, and just really destructive for the whole community of monks in the house. I felt, and I really tried to, I don't know, I mean, I think you can wish for someone to be happy and still not like them, Well, I went to currently the Ganon Tri Rinpoche. I mean, he was the Jansa Choje then, but I asked him, does this, wishing all sentient beings to be happy and wishing all sentient beings to be suffering mean that you have to like all sentient beings? And he said, no. He's like, where'd you get that idea? I was surprised. I thought it would be like, no, you have to really like them. But he said, no, you don't have to like, that'd be ridiculous. You can't like all sentient beings. So I think it's kind of similar. Like I mean, it's true. I mean, it's true. I mean, people like you give a clear example, a good example, when someone's behaving in a way that is inappropriate and harmful to others, in a way that, I mean, as is often the case, he probably didn't really have a sense of how the children felt, He's probably just thinking about, I have this important call and, they're just kids, whatever, who knows? And yet, yeah, I know. There was a guy, I came here by train on Guwahati, and there's this guy, Punjabi guy listening, he has no earphones. I guess it's often the case on trains or buses. I don't know what people think, guys. I can't understand what's going on in people's minds. Just to blare like this, one Hindi song, oh, I don't like that, then another, a TV ad, then this, and it's so loud, so that everybody else can hear it. It's like, don't you understand? Like, what is it, Kant's law of, what's Kant's fundamental law of ethics is like, if it's an ethical behavior, if everybody did that, you would approve of that. Like, if everybody did that, the train would be chaos. I was so glad to see a sign somewhere today, like, no playing music. I think it's on the metro. It's punishable by law if you play music out loud. I thought that kind of guy led to that law. Like, what? I was so happy to see that in Delhi Metro. But yeah, it's true. People do things sometimes that are harmful to others, and they themselves, whether they realize it or not, but something needs to be done about that. And you speak gently, sweetly. You start that way, but sometimes there's no effect. So yeah, you have to be wrathful. And that's, I mean, especially when you're in, like I know you are in the school, you're in a position where, regardless of who you are personally, it's your responsibility to enforce certain rules. Then it really is demanded of you. But then, I mean, then the really careful thing is to act in a way that is strong, confrontational if need be, wrathful, but you still are, in your heart, you want their welfare. You don't give up their welfare. As soon as you give up their welfare and think, I don't care about them anymore, then you've given up your bodhisattva vows, you're totally on a wrong path. But if in your heart, and here's, it's helpful to remember the causal motivation and the motivation at the time of the action. It said actually the causal motivation is more important. So before you go speak to them, remember, okay, I really want the welfare of the children and also their welfare, but to accomplish both, I need to, have this confrontational kind of conversation or whatever. Do this thing, which is going to be unpleasant for them. It's going to be unpleasant for me, but that's what has to be done. That's what's appropriate in the moment. So, but the danger is in the moment, we lose it, right? Because we do things start to get heated, and then, it's easy to lose control, right? But we're definitely much protected if before we had a causal motivation that's virtuous, we still try to at the time of the action, we do try to maintain a positive motivation, but then, different things can happen and yeah, we lose it. But no, it's true. You do have to be like that sometimes. Okay, shall we dedicate now? Yeah. So just briefly, a brief dedication, not like the motivation at the beginning. Yeah, but dedication is similar to motivation. It's that, but it comes in dependence upon a collection of merit, and you direct that energy. So by the force of whatever virtuous roots of virtue or meritorious actions we've done here together. So we rejoice in all of that. And then rejoice in all the virtuous actions created by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and especially our own teachers. So by the force of that, may every being be free from every form of suffering and the cause of suffering. Especially those who suffer from hunger, thirst, mental illness, who have recently passed away, or they take a precious human rebirth. Everywhere where there's violence and war in the world, whether it be in a household or between gangs or between nations, as in Syria and Ukraine, other places. May all these violence quickly come to a cease. And may all sentient beings have every form of well-being and happiness, and all the causes for those, up to full enlightenment. And may the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's teachings flourish, and all the gurus have long and stable lives. And any prayers, bring any prayers that you yourself would like to make, bring them to mind. So may all your virtuous aspirations be fulfilled in accordance with your wishes. Thank you all, and hope we meet again.
Thank you very, very much, Geshe.
Thank you.
Please remember, Geshe is teaching on Sunday morning. Which would you start with, attachment or anger? You haven't decided yet.
No. Maybe attachment.
Yeah, so we'll start with attachment at 10:30, and then anger in the afternoon after lunch.
Yeah.
Hopefully lunch won't be a cause of anger.
Great.